Safe summer, and welcome back. It's our first meeting since June. So thank you very much, Elena, for sending out the agenda. Do we have, we were just speaking on the approval of the agenda. I spoke to Elena earlier today, and unfortunately I have a hard stop at 3 p.m., which just came up this morning, and I believe Alex does as well. So maybe we can prioritize the agenda for those items that need to be discussed while myself and maybe Alex are on the line.
Okay, we'll also need to establish a chair, as Alex is our vice chair.
Okay. Alex, is that correct, Alex? You have to leave at 3?
Yeah, I've got to jump off at 3 as well for a call.
Okay. Okay, so do we have to nominate a chair then, Elena?
I think we just should establish it so that we know who's going to take over when you go. I'm not worried about a motion necessarily, but just if somebody is willing to take it over, just so we're ready when you leave.
Okay, any volunteers? John Frizzle?
Crickets.
I think we should, yeah, you're okay to do that?
I think so. I think Alana can walk me through it if I have troubles.
Yeah, I think we can get through a lot in an hour. Okay. So the minutes of the meeting, does anybody have any changes or comments or concerns?
Sorry, Robert, do you just want to go back up, and I can share my screen if you want to look at the agenda, and we can just reprioritize them so we know what order we're going in?
Oh, okay, sure, sorry.
I'll do that, and then everybody will be able to see what we're.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure what ones, what you want to put where. Can you see the agenda there?
Yep. Okay.
So I'm thinking really in the general business, right? That's.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we can maybe start with general business, and then work our way down, and then go back up to. Sorry, can you scroll?
That's okay. Yep. Back up to
the financial report, the Oracle report, and then the trail report.
Okay. In the order of general business, is there anything you want to move there?
We can leave 8.7 for, we can come back to 8.7. And is there anything below 8.7?
Just the rerouting.
Right, yeah, so let's leave 8.7, 8.8. I also have an order of business to add about the fairgrounds entrance, but we can discuss that really quick.
Okay.
So do we need to reapprove the agenda then?
Just an approval for the amended agenda, please.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the amended agenda? Sorry, I can't see everybody.
Yeah. Maureen.
Okay, seconded.
I'll second.
John, all in favor?
One more ball.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, I'll stop sharing for now so you can see everybody, and then if there's anything that I need to bring up with the master plan or anything, I can do it at that time. Okay,
great. Okay, so over the summer, there's been some discussions around the committee terms of reference and protocols, and Yvette is on our meeting, that has joined our meeting. Thank you very much, Ms. Harvey, for joining. I think there's just some sort of general discussion around what the focus of the committee should be going forward, and just sort of reaffirming the sort of the rules and the protocol of our mandate and getting things done, working with the township staff and that sort of thing. Just before we go ahead with that, I assume Elena and or Yvette, you're going to speak to that in more detail, or Matthew?
I can speak to it, and then Yvette or Matthew can add to whatever I may leave out.
Okay, is John Follis, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Thank you. And Craig, are you on?
I am sorry that I'm not at a computer with a webcam. I'm at my GIS workstation.
No, that's great. Okay. Okay, so everybody's here. So 8.1 committee terms, reference, and protocols. Elena, Matt, and Yvette and I had a meeting on this a couple of weeks ago. And again, I think the purpose is to just sort of make sure that everybody's on the same page. We've had a number of committee members taking on different initiatives earlier than just the summer, but also throughout the summer. And of course, all of that is great, and we're all volunteers here, and it's all our own time. And the effort that everybody puts into this is greatly appreciated. I think that we just want to make sure as a committee that we're all on the same page and that we're following the right rules and procedures. Not only engaging with township staff, but also other third parties that we may want to involve on the Trails Committee. So, Len, is that sort of a good introduction to what you want to say on the subject?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. Through the summer, there was lots of things that were happening, and when we don't meet, everybody's anxious to contribute. I think one of the things I often get emails with regards to the agenda and items that you want added on, and I think it's important that these emails go through Robert initially. Robert and I will work to establish the agenda, and that way we just don't end up with, multiple committee members asking for the same thing, or, Robert can then have those conversations, and when we communicate just prior to the agenda, he can let me know what he wants added onto the agenda. Obviously, if anything comes up on the day of, we're always happy to add it, but just making sure that everybody is communicating that to him, and he's the point person, and then we can create the agenda together. Anything with outside communication, when we're communicating as a committee member, we're representing the township. So if there's something that needs to go to outside agencies, that can come through staff. If it's something that, staff can't handle directly, we may have to come back to the committee to have a discussion. Maybe we bring a vet in on the discussion, but it's important that when we're representing the township that comes through staff and not individual committee members, so we can make sure that stuff gets done. And any other presentations, anything like that people come to you and they want to come to the Millbrook Valley Trails, if you can direct them back to staff, that'll help us create the agenda and just establish some protocols with them if they're presenting. I think that was about it. It was more just in the communication. And if there's questions, I think when there's emails going back and forth, again, it's important to include Robert in those emails, if it's to staff, just so that we're all on the same page and we're all prepared for the agenda coming up or the meetings coming forward. Do you want to add anything, Yvette?
I think first off, can you guys hear me?
No, we can't hear you very well, Yvette, at all.
Yeah. I've been waiting for a new laptop and it seems to be a bit of a problem. Nothing, Alana?
That's a bit better.
Okay, so I try to, I'll speak to the laptop as close as I possibly can. I think the only thing I would add to that is with regards to your motions. So if you as a committee, if you have motions or directions, that those are the ones that are being carried out. So I think if, again, I think Alana touched on it, that if you can CC Robert with that and Alana, that allows them to keep up on what the direction or what the motion was that from your committee viewpoint of what maybe an individual member might be reaching out or searching out for. So I think if it's a motion of the committee, I think you need to give direction at that level. And I think sometimes you have, and maybe sometimes it's just based on research. But I think it would help if it is a motion, if you're giving a member of your committee a direction to carry out some additional works or research information, that it comes through a motion. And again, that you CC Robert and Alana on that. It would be helpful. But I think Alana touched on everything else.
And ideally with those motions, all these minutes go to council, so then they get an opportunity to review what the committee is doing. So that's a good point. And I think when we look at the review of priorities, it'll help guide the direction. And that was part of it too. Looking at the reason we put the Trails Master Plan on was so that everybody's on the same page about where we're going, which will also tie into our budget. So hopefully we'll get it all streamlined after today.
Okay, can I jump in with a question?
Sure.
Just wondering, specifically, just thinking back to my communications over the summer. You know, I had communications with the M&R about the beginner properties, and I had communications with Ganaraska about signage. Are those the type of things that you're referring to, where you'd rather have that go through staff than an individual personally?
Yeah, I think especially with stuff, I mean, the MOU we have been working on with MNRF, and we've got that on the agenda, so I can speak to that a little later. Signage, definitely with the Ganaraska, it's probably better that that information comes through staff so that we can determine where the best place to go is. I know, you know, in the conversations that you had, I totally understand where you're coming from and the signage, but it wasn't something that we necessarily decided as a committee or discussed as a committee. It wasn't discussed at a staff level, so it's probably best if those communications come through staff, both for you and us.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Now, Matt, from a council perspective, do you want to add anything?
No, but I just to reiterate what Yvette and Elena have said, I mean, it's important with the minutes and with the motions and the reports that we provide to council. You know, it's important that council as a whole, if they have any concerns or understanding, you know, are kept abreast of that. So it's just a formality thing that, you know, by crystallizing things into maybe a bit more sort of a motion centric or motion focused way, that gives you know, the opportunity for me to be kept abreast as well. And I'm happy to be included on those correspondence emails with Alana as well, just to keep up and keep track of things as they go. It just helps me to keep abreast of things too. So it's not required, but feel free by all means to include me into that sort of structure. Just as council always wants to keep abreast of things, and it's very easy to just add another recipient to the email. So that would be my recommendation.
Great. Okay, so I think it's very important to note here that this is, you know, nobody's getting a slap on the wrist here. You know, realizing that we're a volunteer committee, we're all very busy, we all have jobs, we all have families, etc., personal lives. This is we're doing this on our own time, and the incredible initiative is always really appreciated. I've been on this committee for a number of years, and you know, people like Yvette have always said that this is one of the better committees at the township in terms of our work ethic, and it's all very much appreciated. I think it's just, again, it's making sure that we follow those protocols and proper procedures, just really to make everybody's life easier, right? Like as Matthew said, we want to make sure everybody's informed, that council members are informed, and that everybody knows what's happening, so that you know, the proper channels of communication can be kept open. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, great. Then let's move on to 8.2, signage on the trails. So Dave, you just spoke about this. There's been some questions recently around the signage on the trails in terms of Ganaraska. Do you want to just give a brief sort of rundown? Because I'm not sure, again, everybody was CC'd on those emails. And then I think we probably need to discuss the larger issue of signage on the trails as well. But let's start with the Gani issue.
Sure, yeah. The one particular issue that came up really just a few weeks ago was that there's some new trail development happening in the Ganaraska, and those new trails connect directly to Gani Transit and towards the west end where our trail borders their property. And so there were two concerns. The first one was that the Ganaraska put up a sign essentially on the edge of our trail saying you are now entering the Ganaraska forest and that users are expected to pay. And so that created some confusion for people because they weren't sure if they actually needed to pay or not. And so I had requested for that sign to be relocated to the actual junction of where their trail begins and make it clear that when you go on to the new trail, that's when you're entering Ganaraska property. And they did end up changing that, which was great. The other issue was that they, on these same new trails, had some horse traffic that was, initially their trail hadn't been signed as being closed to horses. And then they added signs saying that their trails were temporarily closed to horses to allow the new trail to get established. But even after those signs were up indicating that those new trails were closed to horses, they had horses come on. And in one case, the horse then went on to Ganny Transit, and it actually was a group of about 6 horses, and walked up the west end of Ganny Transit, which resulted in a lot of sort of deep hoof prints that had to be repaired. And so that's when I made a point of getting one of our sort of no horse, no ATV, no motorized signs and putting it right at that junction to sort of match our other connection points to that trail. So that's the update there. So we have that sign in place now, and which should hopefully reduce the amount of further damage to that trail, but also the confusion over the Ganaraska sign that they put up, which has since been resolved.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's been some other general issues regarding signage over the summer. We had the issue of signage being ripped out on Station Trail, the motorized vehicles being taken down by probably ATV users. Just this weekend, there was a car that backed up on the end of Distillery Street, or actually quite a large camper RV that did about a 27-point turn in reverse and knocked off a sign at the end of the Distillery Street gate. And I've noticed too that there's been a lot more bicycle traffic on Upper and Lower Meds, which of course is not permitted, but a lot of them are coming directly over the dam and into the park. So I'm thinking maybe we need some no bicycle signage right at both trailheads, Upper and Lower, just to remind users that bicycles aren't permitted on those particular trails. So those are sort of generally the issues around signage. Again, per our previous conversation, we need to make sure that everybody's CC'd and proper procedures and motions are passed in order to, purchase, not only purchase the signs, but placement, and so that township staff knows what's happening and where these signs are going, and to make sure that any signage adheres to their protocols for standards and branding, etc. Elena, what else do you have to add to that discussion?
Just David, just for some clarification. So you had asked about 2 additional signs, right? The non-motorized signs that I said that was part and parcel to this item on the agenda. I said I would add it. Was that for the situation you were speaking about, or was that for a different location, the additional 2 signs?
So my thinking was that one was for that location, which I ended up, borrowing from another spot, and the other one was to have a spare on hand.
Okay, so the one that you borrowed and then you put it up, was that the picture that you sent?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so then that got borrowed from another location, so we need to replace that one and then an extra one on hand. That's your thought?
That was my thinking, yes.
Okay, and that one where you sent the picture, did it get moved over? Because I think there was a request that came back asking it to be moved over. Or is that something that we need to do still?
That's something we need to do still.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
So are we okay if we move that, Elena?
I don't see why not, yep.
Okay.
And then if we want to look at some additional signage, the no bicycle and 2 more non-motorized signs, then we'll have to have a motion to approve a budget to order those. I don't know if there's any additional signage we need right now.
Well, again, I guess the minor question comes into play. The signage that was broken on the weekend on the Distillery Street gate was the no parking in front of gate signage. So it's not specifically a MVT sign. I would say it's maybe more of a parks or a roads sign. So
it's our sign.
Okay, so
yeah.
You're aware of it?
I'm not, but I've just taken a note, Robert, so we will replace that.
Okay, I sent an email to Matt and Alana yesterday about it with the picture. I can certainly forward that on to you, or they can. Yeah. But I think you know what sign I mean. It's not a huge deal, but it was hit in such a way that it snapped at the bolts, so there's no real way to put it back on that I could see. I tried, but regardless, it's kind of beat up. Okay, so we then just need to pass a motion for our specific signage, that being the two signs that Dave mentioned, and then the 2 small no bicycling signs for the upper and lower trailheads. So,
Sorry, Rob, could I add 2 small stop signs to that item for where Ganny Transit crosses what's essentially Jill Williams driveway or Fire Route 310?
yeah, that's true. We've needed those for a while. And John Frizzle or Craig, any thoughts? Do we need any additional signage for Station Trail, or are we just reusing the ones that have been taken down?
I guess before John speaks, maybe I think the issue along Station Trail is that the signs seem to be quite easy to remove. I think somebody else had mentioned that on the committee. Perhaps anchoring them in a cement block would make them a little bit more permanent.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be an ongoing issue that I'm not sure he's doing it, but it's quite easy just to, I guess, pull those signs out of the ground, right?
Yeah. Okay.
John, I don't know if you have a comment on that.
No, I would agree with that. I actually put one back at the works department. I think that's the one that kind of Dave recycled there and used out towards gaining transit. But the ground seems to be pretty soft, and it's going to be a recurring thing. I'd agree with that 100%, Craig. So the one spot, if I'm not mistaken, that was pulled out, and I don't know if it's replaced, is right where, if you're coming from the works entrance off of King Street there, where the mailboxes are, and you go over the 2 bridges, and then right where it drops down and comes off the rail bed is, I believe, where that sign is missing and needs to be replaced. Somebody.
Okay. But to be clear, we don't need additional signs. We just need to replace, put the ones back up that have been taken down, correct?
I would agree, Rob. Yep.
Okay, so that's fine. So we have, I believe there's some cement in the shed. So let's organize between ourselves to put those back up on Station Trail and cement them in place. They're still on the poles, correct? John?
So the pole was ripped right out of the ground, and it was left along the side of the trail. That got brought to the works department. I think that's the one that Dave, you put out towards Ganny Transit, right, Dave? And it was still on a pole, right?
Yeah, I was still on a pole.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've got poles as well at the yard. So
okay.
So let's organize that between ourselves. So at the time, then we need a motion for the 4 new signs. I don't have an estimate, but if we could just set an upset limit as we have in the past.
Just for clarity, Robert, there's 6. So 2 new no bicycle signs, 2 non-motorized vehicle signs, and 2 small stop signs.
I'm sorry. Yes, the stop signs. Yes, the 6 signs.
And have we purchased the no bicycle signs before?
We have, but it's been a long time.
Okay.
It's been a long time since we purchased just the individual no bicycle signs.
Okay.
We purchased signs before that have had that included in the verbiage, but no, I would they don't need to be big, right? Like they could be the same size they are now. Like, I don't know, there's 4x4, 6x6. They're pretty, maybe 8x8. I don't know. They're not large, and the stop signs are small. So I don't know. Should we set a limit of $150?
I would say let's just be safe and go 200 or 250, and I can price it out. If we don't use it, that's okay, but I'd rather be high than low.
Sure. Okay. 250.
I'll move 250.
Sorry, Yvette, you have a comment?
Just a question, Robert. In the past, have we ordered the signs through the company we use? Have we ordered the signs from the company that we've used here at the municipal office?
We've ordered signs from various places. The signs that we've used most recently have been from Signorama and Peterborough.
Okay. So, I mean, Alana, I can talk to you about that. There's a couple companies we've purchased signs from. If you want us to do that, we can do that instead of you doing, appointing someone from your committee. And also, Robert, if you need help or assistance in putting the cement in the ground for the signage, staff, we're here to help you as well. So
Yeah. Understood.
Just, we won't interfere unless you're asking us, but if you want us to help you, we are happy to do that, okay?
No, understood and appreciated. I think
Okay.
the good news is that on Station Trail, it's not very far that we have to lug the cement and stuff in. So it's probably a bit easier. And we certainly have the tools to dig the holes and stuff. It's not worth obviously bringing out motorized equipment for two,
No. Yeah, we would just wheelbarrow it in, but if you need assistance, let us know.
Yeah, we certainly will.
Okay, all right.
And I think Jerry had been ordering signs previously from Maximum Signs in Pontypool.
That's where we mostly order our signs from Maximum.
Yeah. So if we want to check pricing or whatever, I can do that.
Yeah, that would be great. I know the most recent COVID signs that we put up during quarantine were from Signorama. But yeah, and I think our trail marker signs are from the place in Pontypool and a place like that. So.
I was just wondering with the bicycle ones if they might have already had a template. That's why I asked. So I'll look into what the cost is and I can touch base with you.
We have them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure where those came from. Okay, so can I have a motion for an upset limit of 254 signage as discussed?
So moved. John Follis.
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Maureen. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay, 8.3 Millbrook Correctional Facility. So there's a number of things around this we need to discuss. So I'll say my piece first. I know we've discussed it previously, but certainly during quarantine, the jail lands saw an exponential rise in use, particularly during the few weeks that we had closed a number of our trails due to the wet conditions and for rehabilitation. I've had a number of people stop me or contact me asking why the jail lands are not part of our existing trail system. I, of course, have to explain to them that it is provincially owned property, and maybe Yvette or Alana can sort of discuss what the circumstances are and the procedure for the province getting rid of those or selling off those lands if and when they do it. I know there's been a lot of discussion around that on the committee too. Craig has done a lot of work around looking at that area and potentially using it to expand our trail network and lands adjacent to. But there's also a very serious concern around some of the unauthorized use of those jail lands, specifically around mountain biking. Again, it's got nothing to do with, certainly the MVT has not sanctioned that and has not officially worked on those trails in any capacity. But maybe I'll let Alana and or Yvette and or Matt to sort of discuss the recent events at the property and sort of what the status is and where we go from here.
Okay, I'll try again. Excuse me for my computer. So I think over the summer, I think Robert's right. I mean, I will let you know, we always get calls with regards to the jail use, whether it's, what's the status on the jail property, disposition of land, the process of disposition of lands. Can we walk it? Can we utilize it? Can we extend it to the trail system? Can we do all this kind of stuff? So those are ongoing. Those of us have been around a long time. Those are, we get those inquiries on a regular basis. I think recently where we got involved is there has been actual bike trail development on the jail property. And so therefore that was not authorized, nor is it supported by the province. We got a call from the owners of, who I work with, which is under the province line, with regards to who looks after the property. And Adam has basically stated that there should be no activity or promotion of activity on the trail, on the jail property at this time. So I think I think Alana sent out an email. We wanted to make that noted. I had to state that it did not come from the Millbrook Valley Trail Committee. We did not authorize the development of that trail, nor, or taking part in that development in any way. They have contacted, I think through that whole investigation of where these trails were in, because it's actually a high density forest area. You know, the police were called in as well. And we've got notification from the province that they'll be sending people out to put it back to its natural state. They were quite concerned with the development of these trails, like bridges, etc., that have been built within the back end of the lower lying area of the the jail property. So we just want to make a point that it wasn't sanctioned by the Millbrook Valley Trail Committee, nor did we take part in that. So we just want to make sure that we're not doing anything pertaining to that property, or are we going on that property. If anyone is, I mean, they're putting up more signs regarding trespassing. Another area where signs go, you know, they disappear on a regular basis there, of course, but they will charge anyone for trespassing on that property if you're found to be on that property. Just for an update with regards to the future plans for the jail property, those of us that work with province or for the municipality or feds, there's a process of disposition of land. So they'll follow that proper process, which usually means when they're in a position and ready to potentially sell that property, it goes to the federal bodies first for interest, provincial, county, and then to the municipality. So none of that work has been done yet, or they're not in a position until they do some additional work on that property to dispose of those lands at this time. But it's, I'm sure it's going to come soon, probably within the next, I would think the next year or two. But we have a great relationship with the province and the people that manage the property, and we communicate on a regular basis. So if anything changes, they'll be sure to let us know. But right now, that's the status. So we will be notified as a municipality, and the process of dispositioning lands will follow. So, I mean, a lot of people seem to phone and say that, you know, we'll get the lands for $1 and things like that. Well, you know, it doesn't work that way. It will be properly appraised and the value will be set. But as of right now, there is nothing that has come forward to our council at this time regarding the jail property. So I'm here to ask if anyone has any questions. I'm not sure, Robert, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions if anyone has any.
I have a comment. One of the issues about the jail property and unauthorized access has to do with the fact that one of the bollards has been removed and ATVs and cars are accessing the jail property. In fact, the area up higher on the hill where the conjugal visit homes used to be, there's a couple Santa suits up there, and there used to be a huge stash of liquor bottles that accumulated over the course of this COVID winter. The other thing is that I think you're going to have, I'm presuming that it's mostly vehicular traffic, whether it be mountain biking or ATVs, that it is most, not allowed by the province. I think you're not going to be able to prevent people from walking their dogs up there. It's just become so much a part of life in Millbrook. You're not going to get people to stop bringing their kids there to toboggan, especially during COVID time. We had a number of people here in town whose hip and knee replacements were put off, and they used the track around, they used the paved area around the hill to keep up their physio the whole time that, that they were waiting for their much delayed joint replacements. One day I was up there walking the dog, and a couple who had set up some bistro tables up there, collapsible ones that they could take away with them when they chose to, just so that they could have a vista and a place to sit on a hot day. An ATV came out of the forest and smashed one of those chairs to smithereens on purpose. There were 2 adults on 2 ATVs, and they smashed one of those chairs to smithereens. So So they're all different levels of use, and my own thinking is that that a lot could be accomplished just by replacing that bollard and making it clear to people that vehicular use in particular is not allowed. And if you do that, you're going to have to make sure that the guys who go to do the water testing fairly regularly actually bother to use the lock on the gate and open the gate for themselves and close it behind them and then open it again when they come back down. They themselves, it has looked to me by tire tracks that they themselves have started using the broken bollard as an access point. So those are just my comments on all of that.
I just add to that, if I may, Robert, through you. The only thing I'd say is just keep in mind that this property is not owned by the municipality. So it is not the municipality's property. We do provide them advice and direction, like the bollard. They are aware of that. They're aware of the signs always coming up and down and being removed from them. We can just keep providing them information to assist them on that. I don't think they're ever, I mean, I've been working with Autumn probably now for over 12 years, I think, in all fairness. I don't think they're ever, I've never heard of them making major concerns of people walking or taking their dog for a hike, and kids have been using the hill for a long time for tobogganing. But I do think they were quite upset this summer to realize that there was actually bike development and bike paths with regards to the extensive development that they did back there. I think they were quite concerned about that. And keeping in mind that is a woodlot area, it's a protected area. I think they were more concerned about that. So I don't really, even though they say, you know, no trespassing, etc., and, you know, people will potentially could be fined. They could be, in all fairness, it's up to them. But I think they're really concerned with the destruction that it's caused at the back end of their property. But anytime we have information, I'm happy to share it and forward it on to them. And if you notice anything, you're always welcome to send me a quick email, and I'm happy to pass on that information.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just make a comment there about the signage, the no trespassing signage. I think it would be helpful to have that updated, as my recollection is that that signage was up when the actual jail was in operation. I don't know if it's been replaced since the actual infrastructure has been removed, the jail infrastructure. And I do agree it's going to be very difficult to keep even ATV traffic out of there. Actually, anecdote from today, I was walking on Station Trail over my lunch, and a fellow came out of the jail area through the hydro corridor on an Honda Enduro on-road off-road bike that was a licensed plate, and started proceeding along the an unsanctioned rail bed, asking me if I knew which way that went, and I just said, "You're on private property. These aren't trails." He said, "Oh, I've stopped in at Pastry Peddler. I'm from Peterborough, and rode up to the jail hill, and now I'm just riding through the woods trying to get back to Peterborough." So, and this is a common occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm interested. A question I have is, just in terms of, I guess the property does not fall under the Crown Lands Act then, if it's provincially owned property?
That is correct.
Okay.
Didn't it go to Ontario Realty Corp? Is that who owns it now?
That's under the province.
Yeah.
But it's not regulated under the Crown's Land Act then?
No, it's not, Craig.
Okay.
A lot of the property is in the Oak Ridge Marine as well. So a lot of it is protected, and except for actually where the jail used to be, in the aspect of development, but a lot of the jail property is still in the Oak Ridge Marine.
Right. No, I'm well aware of that. My question was more about permitted usage. A lot of people I speak to assume that the property is, Crown land, and as such, Crown land is typically accessible by a citizen, not for unauthorized usage, but for pedestrian type usage, it is typically accessible, right? Crown land.
Yes, this is not Crown land. No, it does not have that designation.
Okay. Now, Alana, was it your intention through the agenda that this is where we would discuss the issue from Craig around the jail lands, or was that under, or do we want to come back to that? Is that under another agenda point?
I would say I'm a little unclear. I think there was a number of things that Craig wanted to talk about. So I don't know if it's most appropriate here, or if we want to save it for when we talk about the master plan and initiatives moving forward.
Yeah, all of my items are related to the master plan.
Okay.
So let's any other discussion on the jail, the correctional facility, jail lands?
I do.
I just wondered. Go ahead, Greg.
I should state that if I am allowed to present, and we don't have a lot of time today, but if I am allowed to present, I do have a few slides that include the jail's lands in relation to the master plan as a potential linkage area, right? But it's not, my presentation is not specific on the jail lands.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right. Okay. Noted. Dave, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, I was just curious if in the conversations with the province, if like what we're going to do about all the access points off Station Trail, and are we inadvertently sort of feeding people onto the jail? Just, I know we're not intentionally feeding people onto the jail, but will all those entrances, those unofficial entrances, be marked? And if that's part of the conversations with the province, just to make it clear that we're not, leading people into trouble.
Yeah, I don't know, Yvette, Alana, what that is a major concern. I mean, ATVs are a major concern on that property now. I know it's got nothing to do with us or the township, but just replacing bollards and putting up fencing along 10 or King Street there is is not going to stop the ability for ATVs to get into that property. There's a myriad of ways to get in there through Station Trail to the back and the side.
Through you, Chair, to David, I think it was David that was mentioned talking. I think that's a really good comment, actually. And I think that's something maybe we should be thinking about on whether or not we should be considering putting some signage up that basically states where Station Trail ends and where private property, from past that signage area. So maybe that's something, again, I know you don't have a lot of time today, but maybe we should be taking a look at putting some additional signage in there with regards to what is Station Trail and what is not. And at least we can do our due diligence of advising people when they're on that trail system.
Okay.
It's a good point, actually. Very good point.
Why would we not, though, excuse me, why would we not maybe encourage the private owners to do that rather than take on the cost of maintaining signs, declaring no trespassing, private property to protect their lands?
I was specifically talking about Station Trail, which is our lands, that we properly advise on our lands.
Well, we do though. Sorry, but when we meet people who are about to veer off onto development property, we do tell them, you are going onto private property, but why would we feel that we have to sign that private property? Why would we take on the expense and the maintenance? Because those signs are just going to disappear as quickly as we put them up.
Well, I don't think, what I'm trying to say is if there's not signs that are clearly marked on Station Trail. And maybe that's something we take a, a little bit of a walkabout. I don't think it's your responsibility, and we're not out there all the time to tell people to stay off. By the way, you're veering off to the north and you're going on an old, rail bed that's on a private property and not on Station Trail. I think my point is Station Trail clearly marked effectively, and does it state that when it stops from being a part of the public process or the public route? So that's where I'm talking about. I mean, you can always send a letter to the property owners, but I mean, a lot of them, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about our trail. I'm talking about whether or not we're properly signed on our trail.
If I could just comment on that, I think my comment would go back to our some previous meetings where we've kind of discussed that our trails are in many cases wilderness trails. I think we'd be quite challenged to mark our trails such that people were always aware of where our trail was and where unsanctioned trails veer off. Like I think we'd get to the point where we'd have to erect so many different signs and or fencing that I'm not sure if that's a direction that we would want to take with a wilderness type trail experience. But if anybody's familiar with some of these trails, like our trails are well marked, but the unsanctioned trails do meander quite a bit off of, and there's quite a history there. It goes back, I would say, decades in some areas where some of these linkages are in existence, right? So I just think we'd be quite challenged putting up that many signs. And, people are still going to drive around the signs, right?
If I can come in now, I think particularly with Station Trail, to me, it's pretty obvious, when you're on the trail and when you're veering off onto one of the trails that have nothing to do, or that, the cross Station Trail. Station Trail's probably pretty obvious.
Yeah.
The way it's marked, and I think I'm tending to support Maureen and her concept. Like, certainly the ministry, I suppose the ministry property doesn't come down there, well, the Ontario Realty, but it'd be, like, given the number of places where people have broken in to cross the trail, or they've been there before it's been a trail, I think Craig's right. There'd be a lot of places we'd have to put up gates and signs and everything else. And the private owners, I don't think they really care until at this point in time. I haven't seen any indication that they've put up signs to prevent it. I would like to be able to control that access, but it's going to take a lot more than putting signs up to actually have any impact. And I don't think we could. I don't think it'd be reasonable to try to spend the amount of money to actually close those access points off. So I don't know. I'd certainly be willing to take a walk along with anybody that wanted to, but it'd be a pretty big challenge unless we started putting in fences, the way they were when the railway was built.
I would support you, John. I don't think anyone is thinking about putting fences up or, because I think you're right. I don't think the private people that own those properties really, I've never heard from them complaining or commenting or anything like that. My question was just as if on Station Trail we were missing signage, we could identify that you're on a public or public route at this time. But if you're saying, I haven't been out there this summer, John, so if all the signs are still there that need to be there, I agree. I'm not talking about going on to private people's property or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
If I can jump back in, I guess my original comment was just would it be reasonable to just put it to the province to just consider more than just the entrance on King Street, that there are back ways into the property, and even if they were to put up their own signs, just no trespassing, whatever it is, just as long as they were considering, other possible entrances, at least as they are today, because it's just, for so many people in this town, they wouldn't have that information, and they wouldn't be sure when they're crossing a property line onto the jail. So I think it would be nice for people of the township to have had the province sort of take that step of marking more than just the front entrance.
Yeah, I'd support the concept of like the province should really know where those boundaries are. I don't think it's fair for them to complain to Yvette that in some way the township's responsible for the fact that people have chosen to ride bikes on that property. It's the province should be responsible for monitoring it. It shouldn't be up to, it's up to us to monitor our properties, and it's up to the province to monitor theirs. And they, from my standpoint, they haven't really shown a great deal of interest in the property, except when it's convenient for them to take an interest in it. So I think they could be informed that they could do more to sign it. I think that's a reasonable suggestion. And if they want to put a security force on it, then I guess that would be their right. But they should be, maybe they need to hold another public meeting to explain what they're doing with the property or something. But I don't think it's fair to blame our staff or our trail committee for the fact that people are using a property that has more or less been, I don't know whether it's been encouraged, but I think I heard it at some point reference to the fact that they kind of like to have people wandering around to see what's going on. That was when the old building was up there. They didn't like people exploring the building, but they were getting some sort of community policing when people were at least walking their dogs there. So it's a little bit complicated, but they have to be responsible for their own property.
Through you, Robert, I have mentioned to Adam about the signage concern. So I did take notes here from the conversation that we've had today, and I will certainly follow up with the province and once again ask them to update their signs, because I do agree. We constantly get called when there's an issue, but they could be doing a little bit more of their due diligence on that property as well. So I'll certainly pass on the information that we've discussed today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I need to sign off here in 5 minutes. I'm on another call, but I can potentially stay on and maybe hopefully lend half an ear as to what's going on. But the next item on the agenda is the Cabot-Monaghan Trail Master Plan. So review of the priorities. So again, as part and parcel with the discussion we sort of had around committee terms of reference and the protocols earlier, the issue was brought up that the terms of reference and the Trail Master Plan really sort of need to be looked at and updated. It was a 2010 document. We're now a decade past that. And a lot of the things listed there may not make sense as they did 10 years ago. Certainly we have different areas we've moved into that we didn't see, that weren't talked about when that document was put together. So I think Alana had sent it out prior to this meeting, maybe a week ago, for everybody to review. But I think maybe before we have a brief discussion on that, I'll ask for the township sort of take on that and what the purpose of this particular agenda item is for this afternoon.
Through you, Robert. I think with the discussions, I know that Craig had been working on some things, and there was talk about what we wanted to do moving forward. There's been discussion about the Mansion Loop, as well as the a variety of other small things. So I think just to take a look at the master plan, making sure that whatever it is that people are looking or interested in doing is either captured within the master plan, or we're going through the proper channels to make sure it goes to council for approval prior to. And along with this, to establish a budget for 2021, because we do have to make that submission for the first draft for council. So it's a little more involved. I don't know, what people's thoughts are, how you want to kind of facilitate it. it would be helpful if we had as many people as we could here. So when we go through the priorities, everybody's on the same page. I don't know if it's something we want to reschedule a special meeting just to deal directly with it, because I think there's a lot of, I know Craig has some ideas if he wants to provide some slides and that sort of thing, as well as our budget projections. So I'll leave it up to you as to how you want to handle it.
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, I'd suggest we do it sometime soon when we have the time and as many of the committee as we could there. I think the discussion should involve the chair and the vice chair, and if they're both called away, then this is probably not the right time. I got through most of the document again, but at the same time, there's some fair complexities. I think we have accomplished more than. I think we've accomplished quite a bit in the last few years, and certainly the stuff that we undertook to do in the village, I think that's been an asset. But I think it's been an asset, and I think we did it properly. But I think we've increased the labor component by the amount of extension that we have. The amount of extension that we've accomplished in the last few years. So I don't like to slow down Craig on his comments, but I would like to hear them at a time when we can give them good consideration. So I guess that's my position. Maybe Craig can tell us what he'd like to do, whether he'd rather do it now or whether wait till the next meeting, and we'll try to put it near the top of the agenda.
Yeah, we're going to quickly run out of time with today's agenda. And I think what you'll see from my slide deck, and I did pass this to Robert, he's reviewed the majority of my slides. And essentially, the outcome is that one of my key recommendations is the idea of establishing a motion to form a subcommittee to look at addressing some of the most immediate issues in regards to the master plan and any potential future expansions and or priorities. And I don't have the experience that you all have with this committee, but my sense is that these meetings are not a mechanism for those types of conversations. And I think that it's something that requires some more focused discussion. But that's without seeing my slides. So.
I think we've lost Robert. I think I would agree. I don't know, to the extent of setting up a subcommittee, if that's what the committee wishes to do, that would be fine as well. But I do think that it's probably a more in-depth conversation than we want to get into today, especially without Robert or Alex being able to be present. I'm going to turn it over to John, I guess, unless Alex, you're staying with us.
I just delayed for about 10 minutes, so I can squeeze a few more minutes in. I just wanted to kind of see what I can, but then I have to go. I'll be completely off, so. Okay. Might as well let John take over.
It's just Craig again. One thing maybe I should have brought this up when we were discussing the terms of reference. I think I messaged this through email to Alana, but the terms of reference does indicate that the committee meetings would be typically after 5 p.m. And I think we're all pretty challenged to try to make these 2 p.m. meetings. We're already facing that right now, where our chair and our vice chair are quite busy. I apologize for not bringing that up during that terms of reference, but I was going to kind of make that point. I don't know when we would start to resume a regular schedule, but.
Yeah, I know you did send me that email, Craig. I was just going to look at it towards the end of our meeting to establish our next meeting date and discuss the time at that point.
Right. Okay.
I think the terms of reference were set up for 5 o'clock. At that time, it didn't really work. We moved it to 6 o'clock. It was tough kind of sending it out via email. I know lots of people said they were flexible, and I just tried to go with the majority, and the majority said 2 was okay. But we're totally happy to move to whatever time works for everybody collectively.
Yeah, I was hoping to try to make this work, but I've since had, one person drop by. I've got like 6 emails. You never really know schedule-wise what's going to be going on. Evening would definitely be a little bit. Even I think even maybe 5 o'clock would work now because we don't have to physically drive there. But yeah, middays are tough for some of us.
On that point, guys, would you like to, while we still have Alex on here and Craig, I know you have a lot of things that you wanted to cover on the master plan. Would you guys like to set another meeting? And hopefully Rob could join us on that as well while we have the majority of us on here. and probably sooner rather than later. I think waiting till next month's meeting.
I would agree. I think, sorry.
Are you looking at me? Sorry. I was just going to say the concern that I have is with regards to the budgetary requirements. If there was going to be a committee decision for a comprehensive review of the trail master plan, you might not have until the next meeting to get that in with regards to a budget consideration. Now, I know we are in a flush position when it comes to Miller Valley Trails due to the contributions that we have received. I know that there was not necessarily firm direction with regards to the utilization of those funds, but there was a request, and I'm happy to accommodate that request for those monies in as much as we can. But it is going to be critical. I'm not sure, Alana, if you have offhand what the implications might be with regards to that process, a comprehensive review of that document. I don't want to guess.
Definitely would have to be a budget item. Maybe Yvette can speak to it because it was definitely done before my time with costs and that kind of thing.
Okay, for the last time when we did the Trails Master Plan, for those of you, I'm trying to think, Meredith, I'm looking at you because you and I have been around here for a while. It is a long process. So I think the first part is if the committee is collectively together in updating it, and I would agree it's 10 years old, and there's been a lot of development, and it probably does need to be updated. I think the first part to that is we did get some funding and budgets. We got funding for it, but we allocated a budget, and we are going into our budget process starting obviously September. So if it is something that you would like for the budget to consider, we should do some research. I like the idea Craig has of a subcommittee meeting to sort of saying, what are we looking at? What needs to be done? What's updated? Because it's not a full committee or a full brand new master plan. It's sort of updating the existing one, I'm thinking. But however, you might as a committee get into it and say, we really need to redo quite a bit of it in here. So it's going to take some time. So I think if you need to have a subcommittee, you should appoint a subcommittee and see who wants to be on that subcommittee to take a look at the Trails Master Plan and make a recommendation within the next month if that's something that you would like council to consider with regards to putting aside funds for 2021 to consider it. But it did take us, gosh, Meredith, I'm trying to think, it probably took us a good year and a half to finalize the Trails Master Plan at the time. It's not something that took, 6 months to do. There was a lot of work, a lot of volunteers, a lot of time that went into updating that Trails Master Plan. So, Meredith, do you remember how long it took us when we did that originally?
I think you're about right on the timelines, Yvette.
Yeah.
And you had a staff person dedicated to trails at the
That's
time.
Right.
And I believe there was at
funding
least
for
one, there was funding for that, but there was at least one public meeting too, because we did integrate that public consultation component.
That's right.
And that is a little more challenging at this point in time too.
So we need to do a little bit of homework on what that cost would look like if we were going to update that. If we're looking at updating it, somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 to update it, or hiring an outside person to do it, or if we're doing internally. So there's lots of options that should be, talked about and considered. And there could be some funding exploration. We can certainly take a look and see if there's some funding available as well. So I do think the idea of a subcommittee is an excellent idea if your committee is supportive of that.
I guess I question whether it's wise to start planning for a master plan. I mean, we could have the subcommittee looking at it, but until we either get a vaccine or something else resolves this virus, I think it'd be unfortunate to try to go through a process that's going to involve public consultation if we haven't resolved the public meeting part of it. Anyway, if we can look into funding for a future time, that would be good. But or a subcommittee to look at it amongst ourselves, I could see that too. But I don't know whether, I don't think it's wise to start counting on something that's going to be a public process until we get out of the mess we're in right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would concur with John. I think that the subcommittee could provide a lot of fruit on understanding the complexity of the entire master plan project and the various constraints that we have right now. I think that, you know, given the timeline, it's something that I think requires a substantial amount of planning and some work that could be achieved by the subcommittee for this year. And then it's always something that we can consider for next year with the implementation of all of those, you know, those comments and what might be required or what can be accomplished in lieu of that. And that also is a more realistic timeline for staff to sort of go through the motions. And there's been some high level conversations. I know Yvette and I have talked in different iterations about how to form and best form recreation conversations and committees of this like in the community to better improve recreation as a whole, of which this would be a part of. And those strategic considerations are things that I think we might have considered feasible given in this term of council a few months ago, but we no longer do. And I think that would be a logical component of those bigger picture or macro redesigns of this sort of thing. So that's just a bit of a tease, I understand, but I think at this point that the subcommittee may be all we can do at this point, and I think it could bear fruit. And then, you know, next year we'll see where we're at.
Sorry to jump in, guys. I have to take off now. I do have to leave, but just if there's anything you need from me, just shoot me an email after the meeting, and I'll try to get back then. So goodbye for now.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
I'm just wondering if we could all have the opportunity before striking a subcommittee to see Craig's slides and to hear from him, since he's already done preliminary work, what aspects of the trail master plan he feels need addressing, whether he feels it needs overhaul or not. And then depending on what we as a group feel, as a committee feel needs to be done, then those interested parties in bringing that into fruition could form the subcommittee. If you know what I mean. I think enough of us have enough investment in terms of time and effort, and some of us, the engineers among us, have considerable expertise, so they would be naturally the ones who would be most helpful on the committee, but in terms of having an overview of what we might be trying to accomplish through an opening of the trail master plan, I'd really prefer to get a sense of that myself before people go off in subcommittee.
So based on the fact, sorry, Maureen, so just in regards to that, I don't think there's any issues with that. So based on the guise of the conversation and the dwindling numbers at the meeting, maybe we should just make this the main focus of the next meeting, to have a whole fulsome conversation, and then we can appoint the subcommittee from there and begin that conversations, because I don't believe if everyone's in agreement, there won't be the budget constraint issue of timing, and we can, you know, this was going to be a big meeting, and there's still a number of things that we got to cross off the list that I think are of maybe a bit more urgent importance. So I was just, that would be my leaning right now, if that's okay with anyone. And I, with all respect to Craig for having prepared what he has prepared, I think it's worthy of everyone's review and everyone's discussion, and we just don't have that as we continue along here.
Are you okay with that, Craig?
Yeah, sorry, my phone was ringing, my other phone. I had to pick it up. I think what Matt was suggesting was that we set up an outside meeting. Matt, was your recommendation?
If required, I don't think we're going to have a time constraint with regard to budget implications, so it would just be the main fodder of conversation at the next meeting. To me, that would be the first primary issue, was a discussion of the formation of a subcommittee or any initial feedbacks for discussion about the master plan in general, and that would inform the subcommittee direction, and people could decide to volunteer or be nominated for said subcommittee, and that would be the sort of the primary focus of the next meeting that we have, and anything that might not get covered in the time that we have today would be sort of secondary.
Yeah, I like that approach. I mean, we have a really full agenda. If we could just, try to get through it, I'm happy to defer. I think what you'll see is my review of the master plan. I'm not at all suggesting a rewrite of that plan. I think the plan is quite solid. I think it's just there's some dated priorities, and I think as a committee, it's maybe worthwhile looking at the key recommendations from 2010 and put those in context of 2020.
Yep, sounds good to me. I think we're in agreement there, John. I'll flip it back to you with your new responsibility.
Okay, great, thanks. Are we on to, does that put us on to 8.5, the French drain on Meds Mountain?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll ask either Yvette or Matthew to speak to that.
Sure, I can start, and then Yvette can fill in all the gaps that I leave. So I was on, we did a site visit, Robert, myself, and Wayne Hancock from Public Works, to review sort of the issue that is present and the conditions and the potential treatments. The discussion surrounded the installation of a French drain. With regards to the conversation, there was an offer of support via either the piping that might be required for a French drain or in the form of labor. And we just felt with COVID and with the relatively small job that it was a more viable project just for Wayne to try to allocate some two public works team, like a small team, one vehicle operator, one sort of assisting with the more hands-on component of the install, and going from there. The reality of that, though, is that it does become a public works item that would need to be funded by Millbrook Valley Trails, because it is not on municipal property, and it is sort of addressing our concern on Orca lands. And I know Orca has already been engaged with the opportunities for the project, but there would need to be a more formal process with regards to the plan and approvals, et cetera, et cetera. So that was discussed. I think there was no issues with the idea of the French drain. There was talk of whaling and other treatments that might be able to, meet the issue. And I know that there was, depending on the review and the plans to address the issue of drainage, that there's a potential that Orca, there was some sort of definitions that might put Orca on some of the hook for the funding for this project due to being their properties, but that would be whether or not it falls under a maintenance issue or not. So that was the discussion, Yvette. I think that's about all I can contribute, but Alana, Yvette, I know there was a discussion and a potential. I think Wayne did provide a rough estimate of what the budget item would be for this project, and so that would be coming out of Millbrook Valley Trails budget. I just wanted to let everyone know that.
Did he have any clue how much it would be?
I believe Yvette has that information.
So basically, he believes that he could probably get the work done in one day. So what we talked about, and Matthew, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, we would probably, for staffing, it's about $200 because of the equipment, and you have to have 2 people there. So you're about $200 an hour to get the work done, but we think we could probably get it done all in one day, and then get the stone in, depending upon what the stone is. So you probably have everything done within under $3,000, I'm assuming. And we also looked at, Meredith gave us quite a detailed email on what the expectations would be from Orca, and for us to make sure that we carry them respectfully as well. And I think we could probably get the work done all in one day.
So I just have a question to that. Maureen, are you aware of the area that they're referring to that needs the French drain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there. Where all the dogs stop to drink water when you are crossing onto the meadow at the mill pond. You'll see that there's an uncut area up the hill. It's not part of the unmowed swale of land next to the mill pond. It's farther up the hill, about 3/4 of the way up the hill. And that's an area where there's a spring. And when the ground freezes, the runoff from that spring splays out all over the field and becomes ice. So it becomes treacherous. And in spring and fall, it is very muddy and very hard to keep the grass growing in that area. So I think the feeling was that it would be better to form a little trough with an underlying French drain to carry the spring runoff into the pond that way. It always did have a bit of a trough in that area. I don't think there was a drain, but it was more natural soil in that area before all the excavation was done for the dam. Now there's a lot harder rock and soil under the ground, and it's making it hard for drainage.
So I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on it, but I think it's probably a great idea. It sounds wonderful. I'm just not sure with our limited budget why the Millbrook Valley Trails would be spending that significant amount.
Yeah, I forget what Rob's sentiment was about it the last time we talked about it. I mean, it's not terribly different from some of the work that the guys mostly on the committee have done with regards to O-ring and gravel. It's much more of the same. It's a longer trough, and I'm just wondering if the public works guys made the trough with machinery, if maybe the Millbrook Valley Trails Committee could do the rest of it.
I can go in on that one if you want, Yvette. We did discuss a myriad of different combinations, but the reality is you need the operator with the machinery in order to dig the trench because of the compaction in the soil. And that's your $200 an hour, like virtually gone. So the additional staffer that it would take to, for two public works, you might need 8 or 10 hours of, multiple individuals from Millbrook Valley Trails doing the labor. And I don't actually believe it would be in the interest of the township for the liability exposure issues to be doing those not on our lands and not sanctioned work as a committee of council. So there really is nominal cost savings on the project because of the requirement of the machinery operation. And also the fact that it is Orca property, and the requirement for a certain level of conduct and a plan to be executed is kind of outside the Millbrook Valley Trails capability to produce for that work, I would imagine.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Through you to Yvette and Matt, if it does go against the Millbrook Valley Trails budget, is it possible if we put in for a bigger budget that it might have a minimum impact on our budget?
I leave those for Yvette. She's the boss.
I don't know about that. So I think there's a combination. I think, first off, I think both Matt and Maureen brings some good insight on the situation. If we're utilizing the equipment, then it's under the Public Works Department. It's a unionized environment. They are the ones that have that expertise. So we would have to basically utilize the equipment properly that's needed to dredge the drain or the work, get the works in ready. I mean, I'm not saying that if you guys wanted to actually, possibly, I guess maybe that goes back to Meredith. I'm going to have a conversation, maybe Meredith, about the expertise, the workmanship, the engineering department having to oversee it. It gives some legitimacy with the work to ensure the work is done, not to take anything away from the committee, because the committee has done lots of work as well. I'm not sure if Orca, and maybe that's a question, Meredith, is we did part of the work at the municipal level under the Public Works Department, but maybe some of the work could be done with the committee as a volunteer. Would that be okay with Orca?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't think that would be a problem, and really the discussion is focused around the requirement for a permit. for that type of work. And so the permit would be issued to the township. So the township is then responsible for undertaking the work as per the plan with all the required sediment and erosion controls and other things. So I think it would be up to the township to determine how the work gets done, but just for the committee members' benefit, the discussion is really that permit is issued to the township. So they're the ones responsible for ensuring the work is completed according to the plan. Does that make sense, Yvette?
No, I think that's fine. I think the conversation basically is if you want to go ahead with it, there are going to be costs associated with it, as Matthew alluded to. We have to ensure the work is done correctly and that there's no other issues. As Meredith said, we'd have to issue a permit. We'll have to, you know, do some work to prep and make sure everything's fine to do the work. But maybe there is a portion of that work. I can go back to Wayne and say, is there a portion of that work that the committee could take on? And I'm happy to do that. But I think roughly we're saying maximum would be 2,000. It might be easier. It might be in and out in 4 hours. I have no idea. I'm just saying roughly for the work and to put the clock down and the stone down to ensure it's done correctly and appropriately, we would have to oversee that for sure. So maybe there is a portion, I don't know, but we could certainly go back and talk to Wayne about that. But right now the base is we need to have, if I have equipment on there, I need 2 people under health and safety. So we need 2 people to do the work, and it depends upon what the work, how long it takes us to do the work.
But the idea, and Robert and I on site, we did discuss it with Wayne that, you know, and I won't speak for Robert, but I mean, there was an understanding that there would be potentially the opportunity to get this work done ASAP. Should we be able to go forward through Public Works, which was the idea, because it provides a specific risk during the winter months with the freezing issues that we've been having and the seasonality or the weather changes and these flash freeze, you know, thaw conditions. It's gonna, you know, that's the real season that we're trying to address the issues for, and it could be addressed now versus later. And it is a significant amount of budget to consider, but given the, like I said, given the endowment and given this current situation with regards to Miller Valley Trails and our inability to do much in the way of a workday or investment this year, this is the year that we do actually probably have remnant budget space for this type of project. And obviously with regards to Public Works funding it, it's not municipal property to do that on. So it's not really an appropriate utilization of public funds. So it's kind of, it's an unfortunate reality, but it's kind of, in order to get it done, I think this is the most expedient way. I don't think Robert would object to that statement based on the conversation that he and I had and at the site. But again, if we want it to get it done this year, which was sort of the main guys, this is the most expedient way to do it rather than wait until the next meeting in order to do it. But again, I think we're probably getting close to quorum issues already. So I don't know if maybe this should have been one of those up the ladder with regards to sequencing, but I'll leave that to the clerk to inform me if we're still in a position to make those sorts of decisions or motions.
You're still okay as long as I still have Dave and John, which they appear to still be on the phone. So you still have 6, you're okay. I can speak really briefly to your budget, just in the numbers that I pulled today, and even with the additional signage costs that were approved today. What looks like it's already in the system, and I'm not sure whether or not Robert has dropped anything off recently. It looks like you're sitting with about $2,500 left for this year. I'm not aware of any additional expenditures right now that we've been talking about. So Matthew, you might be right that it's a good time if you want to invest that money in this project. We haven't had the expenses this year that I think we may have anticipated with COVID. So I don't know if $2,500 would cover it. There also is the money that was donated if we had to utilize that to top it up, but that's pretty much where you're at right now.
If I may, through you, John, I will let you know that we will do our due diligence to get that done quickly. Wayne will oversee it to ensure that it's done correctly, and if it can be done at a shorter time, and if talking to Wayne saying maybe the finished product can be done by the committee or do something, we will do our very best to make sure that we only utilize the time necessarily to do. We certainly never overcharge, of course, or anything like that, but it does have to be, the work for the Public Works Department does have to be carried out by the Public Works Department. the finishing work, like I said, maybe there's something that the committee could do, or, you know, with regards to fine tuning that. But I do agree with Matthew. If you want to get done now, we can get it done. To go back to John's comment, is it possible to ask for additional funds for 2021 because you carried out this project? Well, John, you probably already know that answer. You can always ask, and you can always put a request through for consideration, and I'm sure that council will consider all of it. But if you do have the funds and you do have additional, and this is important for the committee to get it done, this is a great way to get it done. But we would certainly try to do it as quickly and try to get the best price we can regarding stone, etc. And again, if there is anything that Wayne feels that he does not have to do within the Public Works Department and leave it up to the committee, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that.
Can I jump in with a question? Sorry to interrupt whoever
sure,
was
go ahead, Dave.
John, what was my question? I'm just wondering, like, you know, that property is mowed weekly by the township. Is that sort of as a nice, you know, favor, a nicety to the Millbrook Valley Trails because it's considered part of our network, or is that property, you know, more or less considered a park by the township? In which case, I'm a bit surprised by the decision for it to come out of our budget. Just wondering how is that property viewed by the township, and how was it decided that that's a trails responsibility, or was it just because we put the request in?
I think, in all fairness, I'm not sure where it came from originally, but I think it was from the Millbrook Valley Trail Committee. The Parks Department does cut the grass. We do have a maintenance agreement with Orca regarding cutting the grass, so we cut the grass, but there isn't anything large that we do over and above that. So that's, I guess, you know, for us in the parks, it's a park and it can be utilized. And there are sometimes, obviously, that's the first time we've ever heard with regards to any concerns regarding the water. It's been like that for quite some time. I do recognize that maybe it's been, I think someone mentioned that it might be worse now based on the renovation or the work that was done at the dam. But this is the first time I've heard. So my understanding, it was a request coming from the Millbrook Valley Trail. So that's why it would be billed back to the Millbrook Valley Trail. It doesn't seem to be a priority for any other person, or we haven't had any complaints. We haven't had any issues or concerns. So that's the reason why.
Well, I'll admit to having brought it up at a meeting. There's, I mean, I hear complaints from people who use that part of the park, that part of the Orca lands regularly in spring and fall. They just avoid it. I mean, they don't use it because of the problem. And then many of the seniors who walk ordinarily don't walk in the winter even on that portion of the land rather than on the trail because it's so icy. I think it needs doing regardless. It is part of the remediation. I mean, we almost should have insisted that they include that as part of the remediation of the property after the dam work was done, because there was a furrow or ditch that carried the water from the spring higher up on the hill neatly down to the pond before. That was always there. It was always something that that was easily mowed, but now that doesn't exist.
Through you, John, if I may, Meredith, is there any recourse for this committee? Since, I mean, what I'm hearing is, I mean, you know, that it's caused from the dam issue. Did you go back to your people to see if there's any assistance that you could provide?
I wasn't aware of any of these conversations prior to this meeting, so I think this is more perhaps, Yvette, of a conversation to have with Dan, as I wasn't involved in the construction portion of the Millbrook Dam project. So that would be my suggestion. I can certainly coordinate a call, and I can follow up with you after the meeting if you'd like.
Through you, John, if you'd like, I'm happy to have that conversation with Dan. It's the first time I've heard about it as well today. but I'm more than happy to go to Dan and say, you know, there's been some concerns that are raised through the committee with regards to maybe some of the construction works that were done for the dam, and we can certainly report back. The only concern that I would have with that is your timing. So, but I would take your committee's direction, whatever what direction you'd like. I'm sure Meredith and I are happy to go back and talk to Dan, but if you want to go ahead with this, I guess that's up to the committee.
Yeah, so you could make a two-part motion, that one that we direct staff to follow up with Dan with regards to any repatriation or remediation lack of thereof fulfillment that is exacerbating the issue, and then report back, and in depending on the outcome of said conversation, that, you know, we go forward with the upset limit of the 2,500 or so remaining in the budget to be for Public Works to conduct this the works. Like, that's kind of, if you wanted to do two things at once, or like, because I don't expect that by October, if we're waiting until the end of the month, this works will be done this spring. I mean, there's always a chance that it's a warmer fall, but when in speaking with Wayne and Rob, that was, you know, it was something that staff have some time at this point to do, and could be done pretty expediently. So if you didn't want to necessarily wait till October to follow up with the outcome of that conversation, obviously staff can send out an email and make us aware of the progress with that conversation, and then inform us that you know, if it bears no fruit, then they'll move forward with the budget item as directed by the committee. So
I would agree with the first part, Matthew. The second part, if we're looking at areas that need addressing because of water issues, I think there's a lot better ways to spend $3,000 from our budget, because there's much more urgent areas of trail that you can't even get through at all, as opposed to just being, you know, a little bit wet on your feet on the grass, or, you know, a little bit of a challenge. So, you know, somebody wanted to put forth a motion for the first part, you know, for whether it's Yvette or Meredith to work with Dan. You know, I would definitely back that. I think the second part is something that I don't think is a wise use of that money right now. I think it could be put better use somewhere else.
Yeah, and like I said, that's fine. This was an issue brought to my attention as a substantial importance from the committee to address the issue. Obviously, township's interested in protecting the, you know, and alleviating any issues or safety hazards that might present themselves. I think we all understand that we're not through the COVID situation, and that it's likely, just like we've seen over the summer months, that the pressure on the trails is going to be high, and it's going to be high in the winter months too, because of the, you know, the need for outdoor recreation. So, I mean, that's why it came forward today. That's why we've gone through the efforts of doing the on-site visit to expedite the process. But I think at the end of the day, you'll have to take a vote of the committee and make that decision. And, you know, either way, we'll proceed. So.
Okay. So
I guess I'm kind of hesitant.
Oh, go ahead, John. Sorry.
I was going to say, I'm kind of hesitant to commit. I think Yvette said $3,000 first time, and Alana said we have 2,500. That kind of leaves us a bit short. And I'm like most people. This is the first time I've heard the discussion about a French drain for that location. And I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I hesitate to support spending money when we don't know what it's actually going to cost, and it's quite conceivably could drain our account for the rest of the year. So anyway.
Yeah, John, just on that point, John, the conversation, the emails I received for Wayne was an upset limit of 2,000, but obviously we like to give us a little bit of a cushion. And I also think that there was a component of the piping that we would be providing as well as a contribution to reduce the cost of the overall project. Wayne seemed more than open to that, and just needing to ensure that it was in fact the appropriate pipe that he was looking for with the sock, et cetera, for the French drain. And again, we do have as a committee access to the funds from the endowment. So there is that, not to be fully, you know, and not to be ruthless with it, but we are in a flush position that we aren't actually reaching beyond our budget constraints. And that would then be any amount thereof could be replenished with should we just routinely apply for the similar funding in next year, which is always going to be my recommendation from a budget standpoint. But could be, you know, some of those funds, should there be a few $100 overages, could come out of next year's budget to be allocated or replenished to those funds if you're really concerned about fulfilling the requests for the endowment funding.
I'm thinking we should ask Yvette and or Alana to speak with Dan about the possibility of Orca contributing, at least, even if it is just to contribute somewhat to Public Works action on the meadow to establish the drain. But I mean, I really think that, as John says, the priority for Med and Baxter Creek Trails is to reestablish the loop with the Fairground Trail, portion of the trail. And so we have to be thinking in the spring of bridging Baxter Creek again. And so to think about using all of our budget on the French drain, it may not be the wisest use of funds. Even if Orca could be convinced to go halvesies or a third to 2/3 or something like that, it would give us more money to work with to do the work that we had hoped to get done this fall, conceivably bridging Baxter Creek so that we had a loop.
Okay, well, I think that's, we need to make a motion then to move forward with the conversation, because we still have items on the agenda, and I think it seems as though there's not the appetite to take on the investment. So if someone wants to make that motion, sorry, John, I'm stealing your thunder, but I'm just trying to help you out a little bit.
Thank you.
You know, you, Maureen, if you wanted to make that motion to investigate with Orca, but I think any conversation of them taking on any of the investment is a bit optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
So and so it's well intentioned, and the conversation, absolutely staff can have it, but let's not. I just didn't want to be. I'm sorry to be the naysayer, but it's just, that's my expectation. So in the absence of that reality, which is, in my opinion, the most likely outcome, do we want the work done before the winter this year or not? And if not, no problems. It's one less thing for Public Works to take on, and so be it. So if you want to make the motion for staff to engage Orca and have a conversation with regards to the remediation as it pertains to the French Drain project, I'm sure Alana would love to have that motion.
I'll make that motion then.
Mm-hmm.
A seconder?
I'll second that.
There you go. I think, do we have to have a vote? I don't know how. I can't see anybody, so I'm sorry, John, again, I'm stealing your thunder.
That's okay. Thanks for the help, Matt.
I can see everybody, if just aside from those that are on the phone, but those that I can see via video.
Okay, Dave's in support. I'm assuming Maureen and John are in support. John Follis is in support. I'm in support, so by all means.
And Meredith? Meredith is actually a voting member.
I might abstain from voting on this matter. Thank you.
There you go.
Could I just ask a quick question, Meredith? If in fact we can't get the French drain done this fall, is there anything that Orca would Orca object at all to just taking a pitchfork and making a long line, like, you know, like it does, not a pitchfork, like a
ditch.
Yeah, digging a ditch and redirecting drainage is something that requires a permit because you're changing flow, things like that. So that's why we're working through this permit process with the committee and the township.
Right.
So that squarely falls under the Conservation Authorities Act. So one of our regulations officers certainly needs to be engaged in this process.
It's just re-establishing flow where it was, is what it's doing. But yeah, okay.
So are we now on to 8.6, the Memorandum of Understanding?
Yeah, that one is going to be relatively quick. So I know we had the initial Memorandum of Understanding. I met with MNRF, I think back in January, might have been February, just prior to COVID. We had some concerns at a staff level that we went back with to do some initial, just very basic things that even I could see. They did come back with an alternative, and because the the time it took to come back, and I know that the committee was anxious. I did speak to Yvette about having it reviewed by legal, which she agreed. So we did send it through to our solicitor, and he has come back with a number of concerns. So unfortunately, I don't really have good news at this time with regards to that. I have gone back to Jeff at MNRF, and I've asked him how he wants to proceed with it. If there's somebody on their end, I'm not sure who drafted it. I'm not sure if it's been reviewed by any kind of legal representation from the ministry or not. So I've asked him how he wants to move forward, if they want to take an initial look at our solicitor's comments and provide us with another draft, and I've yet to hear back from him. So that's just kind of an update. Unfortunately, we're not going to be in a position to move forward as of yet, and I will come back with another update, I guess, at the next meeting.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions on that, or on to the next one? Okay. 8.7 trail brochure.
This one, John, I just put on because I wasn't sure where we were at with it. So I didn't know if we did an update with regards to, I know I had a question even from one of our staff the other day, whether or not we had something updated, and I haven't seen anything. So I wasn't sure. We might need to leave this for Robert to speak to unless somebody else has some information.
That was going to be my suggestion, Elena. I don't have an update from Robert yet. I know he and I had a brief mention about the status of the project, because I know it's been something that's been of interest and a lot of effort this year. But I don't have any concrete update at this point.
Okay, I will move it off. That could be something that dips into our budget if we choose to have those printed this year. So I'll move that to our next meeting.
Thank you. And 8.8, trail rerouting due to beavers.
So again, this was just another thing that had been discussed quite a bit. I tried to capture everything in this agenda. I know it's lengthy, that we sort of left unanswered as of June. I did have some communication from a resident with concerns about where the route may or may not be going. And I know there had been no final decisions made, but I did indicate to him that I would have the discussion again or put it on the agenda. And if there was anything that we could update him with, I would do that. So I wasn't sure where the committee was at with this. I've heard lots of discussion about rerouting and not rerouting. So is this something we want to continue discussing, or is it going to be left at this point?
I'd be interested to hear the correspondence and what was brought to you, Elena, and from a resident. I guess the information that...
If you just give me 1 second.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. Sorry, accidental hang up.
Good to have you back, Dave. We're just waiting here on Elena for a minute. We're discussing possible trail rerouting, and I guess one resident had talked to the township about maybe concerns on that, if that was a possibility. So we're just wanted to get an update on what their correspondence was.
Okay, thank you. I believe, is that likely to be an Ann Street concern, or we don't know?
Absolutely. I was going to say, I know Robert had spoken with the individual. I was sort of counting on him to provide his input. So if you have something that you can provide, that would be great.
I know through the Facebook page, there was someone that reached out saying they just bought a house at the end of Ann Street, and they must have caught wind of us building a bridge near that location to get closer to the fairgrounds property. And so that individual just mentioned that he had concerns and would like to be involved in the process, but I don't think there was anything more than that. Just asking if the rumors were true and expressing concern. So there was no specific concern that was outlined.
I think in his email, he just indicated the proximity close to his property. So he was just wondering what that route might look like if it was going to go forward. So again, I wasn't even sure whether or not this was something that was still being considered at the committee level, because I know there was lots of discussion about leaving it as is and then discussion about rerouting. So I just sort of wanted to get an update with where you were. Do we need to keep this on the agenda? Is this something that the committee is still wishing to explore?
It would be my recommendation that maybe we bring this back again, just add it to the future meeting, so that if Robert has any information that we might not have as a committee, then we can discuss it then. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue, but what we're going to do and how we're going to address the issue, I think, is something that we haven't provided with a sufficient motion or conversation yet. So it's probably due time that we do that again. And we have about 11 minutes left, and we still have all of the reports to receive. So I think we should try to allocate our time to those 3 reports and any issues that come from there before we adjourn. That would be my recommendation. Over to you, John.
All right. Thanks for the recommendation, Matthew. All right. Which reports are we on to here? Sorry, I know we're jumping around on the agenda, so I'm not sure where would we go from here.
Alana, I believe did we have a motion to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting?
No, so we should start with the minutes. I will indicate there was one error on the minutes. There was a missing 0 on our motion for the weed spraying. So I did add that. So if there's anything else, I'm happy to make those amendments, but that's where we would be at. And then moving into the financial Orca and trail reports, John.
Okay. So
I'll move the minutes of the previous meeting with that amendment.
I'll second.
Look, Chris. Thanks, Maureen.
Okay, moving on to the financial report.
So I think I briefly spoke to where you were at. We had the weed spraying come through, so that was a little over $1,000 actually for the weed spraying. I believe there's just over $1,000 in our contracted services that's been used. So whether that was all weed spraying, I'm not 100% sure. Between the 2 line items, though, we're at with the addition of the purchase for signage, and what I can see is currently committed. Again, if something has come in the last little bit from Robert, it may not be reflected, but it looks like we're at about $2,500 that we have left to spend.
Does anybody have any questions on that, or are we okay to move on to Meredith's report from Orca?
Can anyone remember offhand? I believe that we forecast that the brochure cost was going to be in the ballpark of $2,500. So back to Maureen's original motion with regards to the earlier, because we weren't going to print copious amounts, but there was a component of that I feel like that number is close. So it may even inform or validate that decision to get those maps up and printed the brochures rather printed for the winter season with the uptake and the increased pressure. So I know that's been a priority for us, all year, and we'd like to get it. I think that would be something I think we'd all like to cross off the objectives list for this year with regards to the committee. So that's my comment.
Yep. Okay. So are they brochures ready to be printed? Do we just need a motion to go and do that? Or?
I think I think Robert is the only one who can tell us.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not 100% on that. So myself. So
yeah.
Okay. So if we'd like to move on to Meredith, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. You're doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
I don't have a whole lot to report. I'll give you an update though on how Orca is working right now. So our office is still closed to the public at this time. We do have staff working remotely, but we do also have staff periodically in the office, but not full time. We do have all of our regulations and enforcement staff that are available for site visits and things like that. So I guess I'll look for direction at this point as to whether or not you would like me to follow up with Ilana and Yvette, and we can start to initiate those discussions regarding the French drain.
Yes, I believe we have a motion that will be in touch.
Okay, perfect. So that's good. So I just wanted to let people know that yes, we do certainly have all those staff in place, and we'll work with you to get that sorted.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yes, John Follis, are you still with us there for the trail report?
I am, yes. Rob and I were doing it, so as I understood it, I was doing south of Zion and he did north. And so my general comments were that I think that's the driest I've ever seen the trails since I've started walking them. And I just wanted to tip my hat to the people that actually Ilana has this in paper or in electronic form if anybody wants to read it, but it's not very complicated. Anyway, I saw more cyclists than average and fewer walkers this time. Whoever's been, my perception is that the people that have been riding the bikes have kept the trails in great shape where they've been using them, so it was an easy walk. Another thing that did come up while I was walking is there are a lot of painted stones decorating the trails now, and I don't know if we have a policy on whether that's acceptable or not, but if we don't, we probably should. And certainly if they're going to disappear, we probably should be more specific about leaving only footprints. So that'll maybe come up as a question for after. The map holders were empty. I'm assuming that's because we're waiting for the new ones. The scooping bag containers, there was one that was empty at the MNR parking lot. And so anyway, there are a few repairs that could be considered for a future workday. On the Gani Transit, the walkway west of the West Bridge could be leveled up. I don't think it's unsafe, but it might be a matter of aesthetics. So that can be for discussion for probably the people that use that trail the most. There is a damp area at the west end of the boardwalk, west of the bridge at the change between the DL detour and the Gani Transit, and it would take about 2 meters of boardwalk to cover that. And if given how dry the year is, the fact that it's still wet, it might be worth trying to cover that. I don't know if Dave has an opinion on that one.
Yes, it's on my radar and something I hope to get to.
Okay, well, when it comes time to do it, if you need some help, why we could maybe, it shouldn't fall on you alone. Anyway, the branch that was overhanging the DL road is gradually coming down. I think maybe somebody has taken some branches off it already, but it's almost close enough for me to reach. So that may come up on my calendar sooner rather than later. On the MNR property, there is one loose board on the boardwalk south of the bridge on Cedar Trail, so that would take a couple of screws and that would be okay. And then also on Cedar Trail, I think there is an issue that's going to become more of a problem, and that is on the hill sloping down toward the parking lot path, and it's beginning to gully. And I don't know whether we could start walking, use the gully for a ditch and walk parallel to the gully, whether that would work or not. But I think that will become an issue. And then there were a couple of trees on the east portion of the rail bed that I can deal with. So that's basically what was going on south of Zion. So, and if there's any questions, I'll try to respond.
Thanks, John. That was great. I think Dave and I were already talking about some of the issues that you were talking about on Gani Transit after the bridge. I think maybe some Big O and some limestone screenings, especially in that wet spot, are something that would be similar to what we did on Station Trail, just to have the water kind of go underneath. No,
you've done a great job. I haven't been, like, any time I've walked down there, I've been impressed with I haven't been on the work days down there, but you guys are doing a great job in dealing with the wet spots there. So congrats for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I was informed, and I know, Maureen, you probably walk meds maybe more than any of us, but I was informed, I think, from somebody that the fence along the lookout over the field again has been taken down. Did you notice that?
Yeah, and I've made Brandon Stevens aware of it, and he said he was going to go up and have a look, but that was over a month and a half ago. It appears to me as though he's decided not to maintain that corner of his field. It's an unplowed corner, and it appears to me as if he's going to allow that to overgrow, so it won't be a lookout anymore. And that's, I guess, what we get for the number of trespassers who have gone through that fence. Mind you, he hasn't made a concerted effort to repair the fence. I think it must just be discouraging for him to have to do it over and over again. But he's aware, and he wasn't particularly, he just takes it as a matter of course.
Okay.
With regards to the rest of the trail, there is a broken board in the little sort of gangplank, I guess you call it, the first bridge at the upper mid trailhead. one broken board there, and there is a break in the board on the bridge on Baxter Creek, the first bridge that you hit. So those need replacement and repair.
I have no problems getting out and doing the work for the boardwalk repair you mentioned on Cedar, John, and also seeing if I can do the stuff at the west end on Ganney Transit after you cross the creek. I don't know if anybody else wants to take on anything that's closer to the Meds area or things that Maureen just mentioned.
I'd be happy to volunteer some time. I had a neighbor actually complain about to me about that some of those broken boards that Maureen mentioned as well. I don't know if somebody else. I don't know, John. Sorry, Mr. Chair, if you were suggesting that you would be interested in that area, or.
I was hoping somebody else could maybe take the initiative on that area, and I'll definitely take the initiative on the areas that John mentioned out further west towards Ganney Transit.
Yeah, so I don't mind taking some initiative for that their area on Meds. I don't know if somebody else wants to participate. I could talk to Robert offline when he's back too.
Great, thanks, Chris.
If you're going, this is John. If you're going out there alone, I'm kind of not that flexible in my time, but if I'm around here, I'd be quite happy to help out on that.
Okay.
It's just we're doing a bit of babysitting away from here, so.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you're planning ahead, and we're more apt to be around here on weekends, but not this weekend. So I don't know what time frame you're looking at, but
yeah. Well, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but I probably would need to get out and take a look first. I'll try to do that first, so I can have a good sense of where it is. I may just pack some materials on my way, so that if it's something I can fix on the fly, I'll just do it by myself. But when my neighbor, he's not actually wasn't aware at the time that I was on the committee, but we were just talking about trails, and he said he went through a board there and almost twisted his ankle over. So I said I would bring it up on this meeting. But.
I do. If there's no other questions, what are we supposed to do about those rocks? Because I was surprised at how many there are.
So those have accumulated slowly over the course of COVID. It began in the spring. They were encouraged by the painting of rocks with themes, uplifting themes, and to put a twinkle in people's eye. Were encouraged by the library, by certain of the teachers at Millbrook Public. So they've cropped up all over town as well, but the ones on the trail are mostly whimsical, and some of them are amazing. One of them is of the Mona Lisa, and there's, so for the most part, they are not rocks that are trail rocks. They're rocks that people have brought in from away. And I've got a feeling that they, when they're collected at the end of COVID, that they'll be on display somewhere. I think the Millbrook Historical Society will be interested in keeping a record of what our community response was to COVID. And I think this is a particularly nice one, even though it isn't entirely in keeping with what we prefer to see on the trail in regular times. I think it's a really nice outlet. So I've seen families out there with their kids laying rocks down. Some of them will say things like inspire, breathe, relax. And some of them are just beautiful. I'll send you all some pictures of some of the most impressive ones. I've only had to remove one because it expressed a sentiment not at all in keeping with what we want people to be experiencing on the trail. it seems to actually to have settled down a bit since the kids have gone back to school, for as long as that lasts.
So I'm not particularly offended. I just want to know what the rules are. So.
Yeah, it's against the rules, but I mean, some people need outlet, and this is a creative, artistic one, and they're not hurting the trees or the ground or anything like that.
The only thing on that, Maureen, and I know there's some you see some different things in articles, you know, different other conservation areas are dealing with this in a huge way, and they're amazing, they're wonderful. I just wonder if, especially if we're dealing with community libraries and things, if we can just make sure that we're using, you know, non-toxic paint or things that are not going to be hazardous if they end up in the water or things like that. Yeah. And make sure that if we are doing these things to the community, whether they're the schools or, you know, the libraries, especially, that they're using things that are biodegradable and natural and not going to cause damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll try to figure out who at each of those locations has been the main motivator, and see if I can figure out a way that they can get the news out, the word out to people.
Excellent.
While on the subject of decorating things, a few of the trees have been decorated with graffiti again, and these are the soft bark trees, not the thicker bark cedar trees. So I did take some fine sandpaper out to see if I could roughen up the area and put some clay on it, just to disguise black paint. And some of it I think I can, but some of it I don't. Some of it will damage the bark too much, even to do a light sanding. So we may just have to let that wither away.
Okay. Anything else to add for the trail report, or? Okay, I believe if I'm following the agenda right, jumping all over, Elena, I think that wraps it up. Am I correct?
I believe so.
Do we need to set, is it easier to try to set a date and time here now for the next meeting if we're going to look at a 5 o'clock?
Yeah, I think our dates are pretty much set. So unless people are thinking they need to change the date, right now we're scheduled for October the 26th. Okay. And if 5 o'clock works, we can move to 5 o'clock if everybody's in agreement to that.
I'm in agreement. Is that okay for everybody else?
Yep. Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, I'll send that out as a meeting invite.
I prefer 6, but I can do 5. I personally prefer 6, but just because of kid dinner time. But if I'm the only one voting in that direction, that's okay. I'll make it work.
Well, I actually prefer 6 as well. 5's kind of a traditional kind of dinner hour, but I'm easy.
I can do either. Alex always preferred 6 back in the old days. He was only conceding to 5 because he wasn't having to drive anywhere. So you might prefer 6.
I'm fine with either as well. So if it's more convenient for anybody else, 6 is fine for me.
If I may comment, and I don't mind missing the odd meeting, generally we leave here about as quickly after supper time on Monday nights for our babysitting job, but so I'd probably prefer the 5 to 7 rather than the 6 to 8, but it gets dark that time anyway, so it'll be dark and that'll be fine. Either way.
Alana, can we maybe send out a poll or some sort of thing via email to affirm this up, because we don't have a full attendance here either, so it's hard to know. I think it sounds as though there's some preferences but not fully preferences, and we're only talking about the matter of an hour here or half hour there, so maybe we can just do it that way.
Sure.
We can certainly do that, Matthew, but as for staff, for township staff, earlier is better, because our township staff is sitting here waiting for 2 hours for a meeting. Mm-hmm. And if we can tighten that time frame up closer to their end of their hours of, because we basically our operations are from 8:30 to 4:30. So sooner is probably better for us.
From a staff standpoint, it would be my recommendation to continue with 5 o'clock, understanding the accommodation of families, etc. But I mean, that is the reality of our circumstance right now with the hours and, incurring additional cost to the township, but we can solve that riddle when we do the poll.
I'm happy
All
to
right.
send that out. We'll see what everybody's preference is.
Sounds good. So we have
Thanks, everyone.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah. So would that meeting be by Zoom or are we going face to face?
I think we'll continue by Zoom at this point.
Okay. Good to know.
Thanks, everybody. Have
Sorry,
yourself
we
a
had
great afternoon, evening.
Did we have a seconder for adjournment?
Here.
Thanks, Maureen.
I saw lots of hands on that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.